Within this video, I'm going to return to the same piece of music that I was working on in the basic mastering output setup and look at some slightly more advanced options. So straight away I'm going to open up my channel EQ, because once again I want this to be my first plugin, which is going to let me compensate for the compression stage, which is coming in a moment. So I'm just going to dial in a little bit of extra treble as before. But this time I'm going to go back to my Dynamics folder and select not the stereo compressor, not the basic stereo compressor, but instead I'm going to go down the list to the multipressor, the multi-band compressor. And once that's open, what I've got a chance to do is to start restricting the dynamic range now of individual frequency bands within my mix. Now you can see that there are 4 of these in the multipressor as it's set up at the moment. So what I've basically got is compression settings for the bass, lower mid, upper mid and treble sections of my sound, with controls down here at the bottom for each of those frequency bands. So here, focusing on the bass control, you can see that I've got a ratio at the top, I've got attack and release times, all the things that I would expect to find within an individual compressor, but just for the bass end of my track here. So you can see here the frequency bands as they're set up for each of these sections. I can move these simply by moving these lines, which of course is going to change the crossover points between each band. Now let's have a listen to the multipressor before we go any further. Okay, so you can see and hear it working its magic. Let's just have a quick look at some of the settings that I've got here within the bass control to see what sort of thing I have available to me. I'm going to slightly widen the band, and then I'm going to slightly increase the ratio, perhaps not quite that much, but enough to drive this section of the sound quite hard. I could play around with the attack and release times, and I've got expansion controls down here at the bottom as well. But if I want the overall section, this part of the mix, to be louder, then of course I can simply just drag up its volume here at the very top. So you can hear I just turned up the bass a little bit and pulled down the upper mids. Now if I want to, I can turn off an entire section if I like, just to turn that off here with these number buttons down at the bottom, and equally I can solo sections of the mix as well. Here's just the bass. So I can effectively filter out the other parts of the mix so I can just concentrate on compressing one stage at a time. So once I've set up some settings that I like within the multipressor, I can move on to the next plugin. And what I'm going to do is have a quick look inside this imaging drop-down folder. Now the stereo spread option within here does an interesting thing. What it allows me to do is to take individual frequency bands, which you can see looping from left to right here, and spread them into the left or the right hand side of my mix. And I can do this across the entire frequency range, or I can restrict it. So here, for example, I can pull up the lower frequency register so that I'm spreading only higher frequencies, or I can drop it back down to the bottom here. So what this basically means is the frequencies you see above the central red line are being pushed to the left, and the ones below it are being pushed to the right, and I can restrict the number of bands of frequencies if I want. Let's have a quick listen. Now you can see here that I've got a lower and upper dial from left to right, which slowly introduces this effect across the frequency bands as I see fit effectively. So I can basically push different parts of the mix to either side to make my whole mix wider. I'm just going to bypass that for the moment and look next in the imaging section again. This time looking at the direction mixer. Now this little plugin's great if you want to instantly create a mono mix of your track, or to in some way restrict the stereo width. This will allow me to pull in the overall stereo width. So for example, a 0.5 setting here would halve the width, the stereo width of my track if I wanted to do that. And sometimes that's essential. Sometimes TV companies, if you're working for TV, will ask for mono or restricted stereo mixes, which can be achieved very easily that way. However, what I'm going to do is to substitute in that plugin for my trusty adaptive limiter, which once again is going to be the final part of my mix. I'm going to put back in my spreader. And you can hear the difference that spreader makes. It provides this extra stereo width. So there are lots of extra plugins to play with there as well. The multiband compression in particular may be of particular use if you're going after more seriously mastered mixes.